Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to this session, Act for Gender and Climate Justice. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva, and I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation and president of Red Dot Foundation Global. They are nonprofits in India and the USA. We work on gender equality and justice. Our flagship program is Safe City. It's a crowd map where we anonymously document personal experiences of sexual and gender-based violence and use that data to engage with different stakeholders, community members, grassroots organizations, police, civic authorities, transport officials, and education campus officials in creating safe spaces and preventing the violence. So welcome once again to this session. We are really excited to host this parallel event at the 66th Commission for the Status of Women. Normally we host an in-person event, but for the last few years, we've been hosting virtual events, and hopefully next year we will be there in person in New York. But today I'm really glad to have this discussion on Act for Climate Justice and Gender Justice. We're going to focus on solutions more than the problem, because all of us pretty much know the problems, but we would love to hear from our guests on what are the solutions that have worked. Now, who are our guests? Our guests are really amazing women leaders in India. Last year, we wrote this book called She Is, Stories of 33 Women Advancing the Sustainable Development Goals in India. And it has already received great publicity. And our second book is on 75 women in STEM. And it got even more publicity because suddenly people are really interested in stories of women. And I hope this just raises the amazing work that's already been done. And we will see a shortage of manels. If you are not aware, manels are male-only panels. Today we have a woman-only panel, but I think it's only fitting that we are at the Commission for the Status of Women, so we need to create space for us to talk about the work that is being done. So, welcome again to those who just joined us. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation and president of Red Dot Foundation Global. And our guests today are Rema Rajeshwari. She's a police officer in Telangana state. We have Neelam Gupta. She is the founder of Aro, which is a ray of hope. Smita Mankad, who is on the board of several companies, but she's also part of many grassroots organizations that work with women. Sumaira Abdul Ali, who is the convener of Awaaz Foundation. We will have Roona Ray. I don't know if she's joined us. Roona Ray is an environmentalist and a fashionista. And Afreen Siddiqui, who works with UNDP Asia Pac and is the regional lead for government innovation. So I'm going to invite Rema to begin with her work. So Rema, welcome, and I would love for you to share about your work on gender justice. As a police officer, you've been doing amazing work to dispel disinformation, misinformation, and prevent further violence, but you also work very closely with women and girls, trying to build trust in the community. So can you share a little bit about your work on the ground? You're on mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Hello, Elsa, and a very good evening to all of you. It's really good to see a lot of amazing women at one place after a very long time. And thank you so much. A special word of thanks to Red Dot Foundation for the amazing work they have been doing. And I've been honored to be part of the book. I got a copy also. I've been flaunting it all over the place. I've been showing it to everybody that I'm part of the book. Once again, hearty congratulations and the ongoing work on your the upcoming book on STEM. I'm not going to take a lot of time. As just mentioned by Elsa, I've been posted in the rural Telangana for almost 13 years now. Very recently, I got posted as the district police chief of Nalgonda district it's in the southern region of the state of Telangana. Elsa wanted me to talk about the kind of work we do on various fronts, starting from educating the rural folk on misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, and how it directly impacts the peace and order in these otherwise peaceful areas, communities, and also about the work we do with the women and children in these areas. Let me start by giving a small example, which just happened yesterday in my district. It's a very small one, but then these are the areas we focus. This is how we try to connect with the community, how we take up issues which otherwise will not get addressed because as police officers, because of various reasons, because of lack of resources, a very stretched manpower, sometimes we are not able to deliver the kind of services that we wanted to each citizen who lives in our jurisdiction. That's not possible most of the time. But we try to do it in a way that every citizen has at least some semblance of a sense of justice, that okay, there is a system in place and we can reach out to that system and then there will be justice delivered to us. So what I do is I have a system called the village police officer system. I mean, if you look at how traditionally policing was done in the country, I mean, obviously we have inherited everything from the British. So we still have the colonial undertones to the way, how we do policing in India. But there is this one particular system called the village police officer system, which is almost close to the beat policing, but done in a different manner in the villages. So I was just implementing the system in this district after I took charge last week. And just 2 days ago, one of my village police officers just told me that, summers are pretty famous for a lot of local festivals. Telangana is very famous for the local deities, and people from all over the state come to their native places and they celebrate these festivals, locally known as jatras. So there is this famous temple which houses the local deity called Maisamma, and they have a system of keeping a notebook in the temple. So the devotees are expected to come there, offer their prayers, and they're supposed to write their grievances in that notebook. So they are made to believe that whatever they write in that notebook, it is taken straight to God, and those grievances would be addressed by the God through obviously the panditjis, the priests who are working in that temple. So you know how people living in the villages, they are very innocent, they're very straightforward. So a group of families came from one of the tribal hamlets, and they came to the temple and they just wrote in that little notebook that we face kind of threat to our lives from one of our neighbors because they have some local dispute out there. So they just wrote it in the book that God, please punish them so that we can live in peace. It's a very innocent way of telling God, seeking something from God that they believe in, that please help us. We are not we don't feel safe around these people. Just take care of it. So what the priest does, he takes out the notebook, reads that particular sentence, call those people and tells them that, see, these people have, wished ill, things for you, and you're supposed to do a remedy, and he takes money from the other group of people. What they do, they go back to the village and they actually attack these people. So there is a crime. And then we intervene. So when we started doing the inquiry, we came to know that, this is what actually happened. So the first thing we do is we definitely call the priest to the police station. We warn them, we tell them not to encourage such practices. And then the second thing we do is I send my group of police officers who are the village police officers along with the cultural troupe that I have. The cultural troupe, which uses the format of storytelling, using ancient storytelling techniques, and they go to the village, they camp in the village, they gather all the villages and they conduct 2 hours program, event using ballet, songs and plays to educate the villagers about superstition, because even today most of the villages follow superstitious practices, and in most of the instances they lead to petty crimes like these. So we conduct. So this is just one small example how we identify local issues, and then, we go to that place, we address the root cause, and then we go and be with the people. So there is no registration of case involved here. We're not bringing people to the police station. What we do, we go to them, we sit with them, we address the issue, and we just ensure that everybody lives in harmony. This is exactly what we do for the women and children also. You see, we cannot expect every woman and every affected, child to come to the police station. My farthest police station is almost 3.5 hours from the headquarters. How do you expect, a victim, a woman, a victim of a gender-based violence to travel all the way to my office? She may not even have the courage to tell somebody in the family that something is happening to her. She's being abused within the 4 walls of her house. She doesn't have that kind of a luxury. So what we do, we have these mobile teams, we have the village police officers who actually go to the village, and they encourage these women with the help of the local women self-help groups. And then we have some, we have enlisted some civil society organizations who work very closely with the police officers. And then we have a system called a Bharosa, which is a one-stop crisis center for these kind of women. And very, very confidentially, we bring them. We offer psychological support to them. We offer legal support to them. If they want to book a case and go ahead with the criminal justice system, then we facilitate that. So what is happening in the last few years on ground is that we are slowly taking the criminal justice system to the victims wherever they are. It's a transformation that we are trying. I'm sure there are many naysayers. I'm sure there'll be a massive criticism coming as I'm making this statement that no, that's not what happens on ground, but it is happening. We are trying. It's a slow transformation, but nevertheless, change is happening. And some of the officers are doing it quite sincerely with a lot of passion. And very recently, I think 2 weeks ago, I was given this amazing opportunity to go and present a report on the one-stop centers called as the Sakhi centers before the Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development, Madam Smriti Irani in Delhi. There was an event in view of the International Women's Day. And then I had this amazing opportunity to present a report after studying almost 704 one-stop centers, otherwise known as Sakhi centers, working in different parts of the country. So if you look at how these centers are working, it's a very recent development. Most of the centers are still in their nascent stage. But even if they are able to cater to 10 women living in that vicinity, even if they are able to deliver justice, even if they are able to offer psychosocial support to 10 women who are affected by gender-based violence, that goes a long way in the whole scheme of things. We are at least starting somewhere.
Rema, can you share what is the One-Stop Crisis Center and what services are available there?
This was I mean, a lot of these initiatives are a result of what happened in 2012, what we call as the Nirbhaya incident, the most unfortunate incident that happened in Delhi to the pharmaceutical student. So after Nirbhaya Fund was established, the Ministry for Women and Child Development, they have instructed all the state governments to establish one-stop centers. Initially, they were called as One-Stop Crisis Center. The idea was to establish a center where legal, psychosocial, and medical assistance will be given to the victims of gender-based violence. For example, there is a victim of rape. So if you look at how rape victims were handled in the past, before these centers were established, a rape victim will have to go to the police station. She has to go through that whole process of secondary victimization, where the cops will be asking questions. Sometimes she may not be comfortable, and there won't be any trained counselors, or there may not be even female police officers to record her statement. And then she will be taken to the local government hospital where the medical examination happens. So after she goes through this horrible experience of having, being raped, and then she goes through this whole process of going through, one institution after another, in order to facilitate easy access to these victims, so that everything happens at one place, these one-stop centers were established. So today, a rape victim has the option of coming to the center directly. The recording of the statement happens there. Her medical examination happens there. And she's also given a temporary shelter. If the rape happened in her house, or in a place where, somebody close to her, committed the offense, then she may not be, wanting to go back to that place. So they also offer a temporary shelter. So this is what happens in Sakhi centers. So we are in the process of coming up with the national model for victim assistance and support. It's part of the National Police Mission, which was established 2 years ago. I'm a member of that mission. So we are studying. So these are, small little efforts which happen in different parts of the country, and we are making headway very slowly, but yes, we are getting there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rema. And, in your state, there are so many amazing police officers. You're, of course, one of them. And I think it's very important as well that if you see these women police officers, then you automatically also have role models to emulate. But when it comes to reporting crime, it is easier for women and girls or even children or other vulnerable groups to come forward. Have you seen an increase in reporting?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you see, every year when the National Crime Records Bureau comes up with the crime statistics, most of the media houses will be publishing stories about the crime reportage in the country. And, the headlines are usually like, crime against women goes up, bodily violence goes up, and all. That is primarily because with increased awareness, more people approach police stations. Back in those days, if you look at what happened 10 years ago, I mean, even in 2009, when I entered the service, if a child was raped by somebody in the family, we had to literally beg the family to, get them to the police station to book a case. They would refuse to book a case. So, but things are changing today because a lot of awareness, social media is everywhere. People are aware about their legal rights, and there are multiple agencies working on ground. I'm not just talking about the government institutions. I'm also talking about the civil society organizations. In most of these areas where social ills are concerned, civil society organizations are doing amazing work. They work as a force multiplier to the law enforcement agencies. So people have more awareness, and with more awareness, definitely the crime figures will go up because of the increased figures in the registration.
Thank you, Rema, and please stick around. And those who have questions for Rema can put it in the chat and she can answer them. I will come back to you after I do a round of questions with the others. So Neelam, I'm going to ask you next to come. So in the book, you share about how, you saw a child who was feeling cold and you gave the person a sweater, and the next day again the sweater was missing, the child was feeling cold, and then you decided that you're going to teach them. It's like not give them a fish but really give them the skill
how to fish.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about your work, how you started, and what is it that y'all are doing, especially during the pandemic? Let's focus on the solutions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to come here and share my work and experience. And Elsa Mary, thank you so much for featuring me in the book. It has been such a excellent experience. And as earlier Rema was saying, I am also flaunting the book everywhere, and so proud to be there in your book, to be featured in the book. And also congratulations on coming up with the second volume of 75 more leaders. And I think this is excellent. A big task being done by you for the service of women and service of community. Great job. So, as it happens with any calamity, whether it's natural or man-made, the vulnerable population who takes the, worst hit always, and women and girls being the most vulnerable, as we all understand and we all know, always are the, at the end, receiving end of anything that happens in any disaster that happens in the society. Going back to my childhood, when I started, when the seed was sown of Aro Foundation, I was very moved by these inequalities, the vulnerabilities of people, children, women begging on the streets, children not going to school, and similarly this girl not going to school but begging. And then you realize that whatever you may give is not a solution, as you were earlier talking about the solution mode. We know there are problems. I could see that the girl is in the problem, and she doesn't have clothes to wear. She's shivering in cold. She doesn't go to school. So she is suffering poverty. I could see all that, and my little mind only could concentrate on giving. Focus, just gave her something to ease her suffering. But then later on, I realized when I came back the next day and she was again standing like that, that giving is not a solution. We have to find more concrete solutions to these problems of inequalities, and women being most suffering from the inequality. I wanted to focus on gender inequalities right from the beginning, that at least women and girl child, if you are serving 50% of the population through your work, through your efforts, you will make a big dent in this whole issue of inequalities. And COVID has shown us really what we were talking about the inequalities. The COVID had a multiplier effect on all these inequalities, as you know. The lockdown, how women suffered more in the lockdown. Again, we come back to the problems, but then be it education. I've seen in my communities, girls were hit more. There is a poor family in city also. I'm talking about slums in Delhi. They had only one device for giving it to their children or somebody to study, to do online work, and they gave it to the boy. Obviously, the preference was for the boy to study first. One device is there, then obviously the girl suffers. If there is the girl is sitting at home and she doesn't you remember the migrant workers, they all went back to the village and the girls were taken back. You will not believe that many of the girls were married off because the family was poor, they didn't have any resources, they didn't have job, and the girl didn't find a good school nearby her village, school or college. So the best option for the parents was to marry her off. So that was another big inequality which was multiplied due to COVID. If you talk about health and sanitation, women's health suffered most because of the drudgery they were involved in, the household chores, the whole day taking care of the family. The mental health was affected, and all the work was being done by women. Domestic violence they suffered. The Women's Commission is reporting a big rise in the number of cases of domestic violence during COVID. So all these things possibly sorry, the NGOs like us, the people working at the grassroots, they want to find solutions to these problems, both for the gender inequalities, because what we believe is if women are empowered, if they are no more vulnerable, obviously they will suffer much less like other rich populations or the richer segment of the society who can take all these things in their stride, who have the resilience. So the word I caught during this COVID was the resilience. How to build resilience in women in the communities by empowering them, by reducing inequalities, by protecting their rights, by reducing drudgery and violence from their lives, and giving them economic and financial empowerment. These were some of the things that we were earlier focusing upon when we worked in Aro Foundation. But COVID really made us redouble our efforts towards these things, because this we felt was really truly important in a woman's life. I'll give you some examples. We had been working earlier in the village rural communities. So these women in the communities, we were giving them multiple options of livelihoods. If you know that women in rural areas, they are 24/7 working. They have no domestic help. They help in agriculture. They help in taking care. I mean, they besides their domestic chores, they are also all the time busy in farming and doing allied activities. So these women, we taught them how to do better agriculture, how to do better water management, so that they better crop management, pest management, overall we trained them into agriculture, and we helped them utilize the land which was lying vacant near their houses, in their backyards. They grew vegetables there. We helped them get better seeds, and they could grow vegetables. We gave them backyard poultry training in backyard poultry, where they could rear even 20 chicks. just get the small chicks and let them grow, and then they can sell the chicks. We gave them other options like beekeeping, vermicomposting, and things, which they could do sitting at home. So all these trainings, when COVID happened, you won't believe that these were the women, they were selling their stuff from their backyards, because there was no transport available. The village was not getting the commodities, vegetables, etc. So they were very gladly, sitting with their vegetable produce and trying to sell. And they felt so confident after, doing such things. Another thing was, suppose we are teaching them cutting and tailoring and dressmaking and, sewing, etc. So when COVID happened, we helped them make masks. And you won't believe they're still doing it, because masks are now, till now, for the past 2.5 years, we need so many masks, huge numbers of masks are required everywhere. So these women got another vocation. They could really live through the financial crisis. They could make money, they could survive, they could help their families survive. So these are some of the things we really took up before pre-COVID, in fact, to empower women. But then we felt that those women who were really empowered through our efforts like this, awareness, health and sanitation, skill development, farm skills, non-farm skills, then financial inclusion, all these efforts, then access to water, access to power or renewable energy. When we had provided all these things to those women, we found could fight COVID much better than the other women. They could understand what the disease was. They could help others fight the disease. They could be ready with solutions. They could, like I told you, make masks. They could clean their environment, keep the healthy environment, and of course use their skills and products during those times. So these are some of the things, which we had been doing and which have helped us developing our way forward towards gender equality. And also women beneficiaries have found how to build resilience in them, in their communities, families, which very proudly, I can say that at least 1 lakh women which were helped earlier very thoroughly through these processes, have really stood up and not only helped themselves and their families, but also the communities, the villages where they have lived.
So if I understand you correctly, before COVID, all your programming that helped women in livelihood skills came in handy with them being agile in the way they were thinking and responding to the situation. And they took the lead in many areas in their own village to, respond to the crisis and thrive in that, right?
Exactly. Because for us, skill development is not only one part of the program. Along with skill development, we take up, awareness building, health and sanitation, educating them on the environment, the also, the financial inclusion, so that they get a 360 degrees exposure to the requirement of the modern times and the negotiation skills that they should have whenever there is a calamity or disaster. So they came up with solutions themselves. In fact, that was the best part. No, they were so active and agile, as you say, that they were all over and finding solutions, helping others. So that was really a sight to be seen in those communities. So we feel that if women are empowered, if equality, gender equality is in place, then I think we could find solutions and we could tide over any circumstances, any calamity, any disaster much better than we are fighting these days with all those things. So Aro Foundation is our NGO, which was founded in 2001. I was the founder president, and which was my dream fulfilled when I founded this Aro. And for the past 20 years, we have been working on multi-sectoral projects, which include education, health and sanitation, skill development, renewable energy, water, environment, all those things which not only affect gender and women is the cross-cutting theme across all our interventions. We take women as central to the development work that we do. So it not only helps us reduce gender inequality, but also helps us address climate change and climate action, because a lot of work has gone into environment, protecting environment through reviving water bodies, rejuvenating ponds, recharging water, reducing the water wastage in agriculture, which is the maximum wastage of water happens in agriculture. Those who are rich, they will just leave their pumps open, and throughout the night, the water will be flowing. So all these interventions have helped us in reducing climate change also, and addressing climate change. And I would like to also tell you and the audience that Aro Foundation was awarded the Global Compact, United Nations Global Compact Award, Best NGO Award for addressing all 17 SDGs. Because we are working on sustainable development and environmental issues also. So this was something that was recognized by the Global Compact, and we were awarded this. So this is
Well,
about the work that is
congratulations
happening.
then
Thank
on
you so
your
much.
wonderful work. Thank you so much for sharing. Stick around, put your details in the chat section so people can reach out to you and learn from some of your amazing initiatives. Thanks, Neelam. Now I'm going to invite Smita, who also works with grassroots organizations, but a different constituency. Smita, welcome, and share a little bit about the work that you're doing with artisans and why did that come up? And also you work across the spectrum. So you are also keen on increasing women in boards. So, but first share a little bit about your artisan initiative.
Thank you, Elsa, and thank you for having me on today. There's such inspiring women and such inspiring stories. So really fabulous to be here today to share as well. So like you said, I wear many hats, but the couple of things I'll share. So at the grassroots level, I have worked with artisans and craft communities over the last 20 years. And now I do it broadly under with two organizations. One is a foundation called the Women on Wings Foundation, and where their mission is to create 1 million jobs for women in rural India. So it's very, very specific. It's women, it's India, and it's rural India, specifically. And the way it's done is through mentoring and support of social enterprises and different organizations, and to help them scale up so that they can continue to employ more women. So it's management mentoring, it's any form of business consulting support, CEO mentoring, helping them with finance or marketing and so on. So that is one organization that really, I think, pivoted beautifully at the beginning of lockdown, the first lockdown in 2020, because in 2019, we had been working on creating a platform so that we could offer the services to a much larger number of people, because up to that point, it was very much in person and it was deep hand holding. The team would go out to an enterprise and be embedded with them, for 2 weeks at a time, and 2 or 3 times a year over 3 years. So very, very deep hand-holding to make sure that they, are able to grow and sustain that growth. So the platform really came, at an amazing moment. We launched it in February of 2020, and we were able to just reach out to all the partners and double the number of partners we were supporting, because as you know, everything went online. There was no choice. So everyone was lost. We were all, for the first time, in that same boat of looking for answers and looking for solutions. And I think the common thread was, how do we help the most vulnerable? How do we help the constituencies that we are supporting and help them? In the beginning, it was very much about relief. Immediate relief, but then very quickly it became about recovery and not just survive, but to revive and then thrive. So we kind of looked at it in these 3 ways. The other thing that happened, which was quite magical, was in April 2020, people like me who've been associated with the craft and artisan sector for many years, whether it's professionals, whether it was designers, whether it was people running NGOs or social enterprises, we quite spontaneously came together to help artisans. And we said we should do something. So as you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of NGOs and craft-based organizations, but each one has been doing what they do kind of in a silo. There wasn't really a bridge that connected them. There wasn't so much collaboration between them. So one amazing thing that happened is we came together under this umbrella. We called it Creative Dignity. And the heart of it really being, how do we bring, continue to bring dignity to the lives of these artisans? They shouldn't have to go out with spread hands. They should be able to earn decent living, not just livelihoods, but for their lives through the work that they do. And the choices we make, Elsa, in what we buy, in what we wear, the food we eat, how we consume, has such a direct impact on the livelihoods of these people, And when we look at a handmade product, it's amazing how many SDGs it meets, and we never look at it in that way. So in India, we actually have a problem of plenty because we've been surrounded by these products growing up. They're available easily. Handmade is not rare. Handmade is what we have available every day in our lives. But if you break it down and you really look at it, then the raw material is typically local. It's home-based work, whether it's a weaver, whether it's a woman doing embroidery, whether it's block printing. This is all home-based works. They do not go to factories to make this. It's handmade and handcrafted. So your carbon footprint is very, very low, and there's a very low, small amount of machinery that might be used. And largely, not just the whole family, but the whole community comes together to produce one item. It is not one person making one item. It really takes a village to make that one item. So if you look at whether we're trying to address no poverty or gender equality, decent work, reducing inequality, but most of all, the responsible consumption and production aspect, and of course, climate action. So it beautifully, sits at the intersection of both gender and climate, which is, what we're talking about today. And so by the simple choices that we make in the way we consume, we can actually contribute to all of this. So, I mean, it's such a powerful story and such a powerful and easy way for us to support, all of this.
So Smita, a thought crossed my mind. We take this for granted. India has so many handicrafts, and I'm sure there are so many countries that have their own handicrafts, and I'm so glad that you and your friends are keeping it alive because, like you said, it's sustainable and it's environmentally friendly. Do we need a label that on every product shows what SDG it fulfills?
Yes.
I think that is a good way of educating people and then making them even more conscious. Like, for example, if I buy clothes in India, I go to Fab India. That's my go-to place.
Yeah.
I don't care about the pricing, but I know for sure that it's made by most likely a woman. It's, organic and stuff like that. But I think to actively and consciously encourage responsible consumption, we need those labels now on those. Can you share a little bit more about this platform that you're talking about that brought the artisans together? Because what I understood from a previous conversation with you, see, in India, we are a country of 1.2 billion. By 2050, most of the world is going to be urban. And COVID has shown that when people came to the urban areas and a crisis hit, there was no refuge for them. They all returned, and they returned on foot to their towns and villages. And what you're trying to do is bring livelihoods to where they are so that they don't have to come to an urban area, right? And that way, I think you distribute equality, the economy and prosperity.
Absolutely. I mean, you've covered a lot of points that we're working on, but absolutely right that you keep the jobs in rural areas so that people don't need to migrate. They're with their families and their communities. They are not, they never want for food when they're in the village, first of all. They do not want for clothing or shelter. These things are much easier to take care of, in the local communities. And for the women, it is so empowering to be able to bring income home, even if it is a few 100 rupees or a few thousand rupees. It gives her agency, and it gives her incredible self-confidence. And when women earn the money in the family, they spend it on education and healthcare for their children, right? So it's not going into others. They put it back into the family. So you have healthier children. You have, they're getting educated and so on. So talking about the platform, what happened at Creative Dignity is that, yes, in the beginning, we did a fundraiser and we were able to, through a network. So what happened is it spread like a cobweb, each one connected to whoever they knew. And soon we had like 16 regional teams across the state, which could really reach the last mile, groups and artisans who were the most vulnerable, and in the local language. Because in India, that's another challenge. You need people on the ground if you really want to reach the right people, Otherwise, it often happens the aid is going to the same group who's visible or who's articulate or, who's made it to the list. So we were able to reach people who were really vulnerable and needed the support. So that was for rations or medical supplies. But very quickly, what we did is that we started this, all these artisans were stuck with a lot of unsold stock. So, all the retail was shut. There were no exhibitions. There was complete lockdown for months, right? So in that sense, they're very much like daily wage labor, that if they don't sell, they don't earn. And if they don't earn, they don't eat. So it was very important to help them sell the stock that they were sitting on. Now, how to do it, because everyone was so distributed and so remote. So we started this process of digital literacy, where we helped them create catalogs of their products that they had. So we tied up with design schools, and we had one design student work with one artisan, and just using their phones. So we did a little training, photography training, online on Zoom, taught them how to take simple pictures, had a very simple template for a catalog, and they worked together, and in a week, they were able to produce this digital catalog, which is, by the way, available to see on the Creative Dignity website. So it's creativedignity.org. And we ended up with 350 product catalogs. Then we tied up with 12 online platforms, including iTokri, GoCoop, Okhai, Jaipur, Freedom Tree, there's a whole lot of them who very happily listed these catalogs and products, So suddenly there was a market available. And this way, about 150 small NGOs, not just became digital for the first time, they got retail reach, and they were able to sell, never leaving their homes. So, fantastic use of technology and everything remotely. And over the last year and a half, we've generated like 5 crores in sales for these people, so it really made a difference in that sense. So
thank you,
yeah.
Sita, and do put in the chat section the links. And I want to say that the connection to the marketplace is absolutely critical. And like you said, language. a country like India, you need to speak the language, otherwise you don't reach the last mile. So thank you for your work, and hang around. There might be questions for you. I'm going to invite Sumaira now to share a little bit about her work. She has been an environmental activist, put her life at great risk to save our environment. We live on the coast, so there's mangrove that have been destroyed, sand mining, there's noise pollution, and all of this has affected the quality of life. And her work started much before it became fashionable to talk about climate. So over to you, Sumaira. Please share a little bit about your work.
Thank you so much, Elsa Marie, and thank you to everyone who's listening here. It's a real honor for me to be here among all these other wonderful women, including the hosts of this event. Can I share my screen, Elsie? I'd just like to show some pictures.
Yeah, sure.
Not great at this, but okay. Can you see this? Okay, so I am the founder of an NGO called Aro Foundation, and a little bit differently from the other women whom we've just heard from, I work on policy and its implementation. So although it's not primarily about women, but it is very much about women. And of course, I'm a woman myself. So it's also about how women take leadership roles in these issues, not just how they are brought up. Much before lockdown, this is something I wrote for Forbes India in January of 2020. It was clear that climate change is the defining feature of our times. Of course, I had been working on it for decades before that, but it had become already clear to the world in terms of the events that we were experiencing. And during lockdown, it became even clearer that climate change is actually a women's issue too, because of so many factors that the other people who have just spoken have spoken about. But the UN has agreed with it and said that women suffer most. They drown more often in floods, for example, because they're less likely to know how to swim. They have to walk further for water. They are the ones who cannot leave when men can leave. They cannot leave their villages, and they rebuild. They are responsible for the children and for their families and food, which is exactly what climate change addresses, kind of makes much worse than before. It's not new, activism, and especially women in activism. This is my grandmother in the center here, and she is protesting during the freedom struggle for her mother being jailed because she told Indian shopkeepers not to sell and Indian people not to buy English cloth. So activism on the streets is not new, and women have always been in the forefront for it, for this kind of activism. It's just that they haven't been recognized as being the real leaders they are, because somehow men always take precedence. So, and the Chipko movement itself, which is one of the precursors and one of the most inspirational environmental movements, was initiated and led by women in Uttarakhand, which is today one of the states facing one of the worst effects of climate change through landslides and through other things. And their inspiration leads me, for example, to bury myself in the sand one day and show solidarity with the sand, just like they did. The other issue I worked on, of course, is noise pollution. WHO came up this year in 2021 for the first time. They told us that India faces a impending mountain of hearing loss. And these are some of the figures that they came up with. And I'm talking of how women impact policy and how women suffer too from policies when they don't control them. So India is among the leading countries of hearing loss. It is said that hearing loss and dementia are directly related. And of course, there's all the other issues of not being able to learn, which again is a women's issue when it comes to their children's education suffering and other things like that. So noise pollution, from an issue which 20 years ago people laughed at me that this is not a thing to talk about at all because it doesn't make any sense, today has become an issue. This is a piece which was written about me in the Washington Post in 2013 about fighting to reduce noise. Again, noise is made, there's a huge amount of political and commercial vested interest in making noise. And the easiest way is to pass the buck to others. But the people who stay home, and initially people told me this is a very elitist issue. You're talking of noise pollution because you're returned from the West and you like, you believe Indians love noise. But when I started receiving calls for 20 years, more than one call a day, at least every single day, I found that the slum dwellers were much more affected because they were the ones who said, we don't have doors and windows to shut. And this is the impending mountain of hearing loss that I spoke about a bit prematurely. Indian cities, this is 123.2 decibel levels. The World Health Organization tells us we should not be exposed to more than 80 decibels. Mental health, your mental health suffers. We call it irritation because it sounds like a more insignificant thing, but actually it's a serious mental health issue. And consultant psychiatrist Dr. Amit Desai has told us why, because it raises your adrenaline and it makes you really angry. The sound and fury of silence during lockdown, again, it was obvious that for the first time ever, people experienced silence in cities. They saw wildlife in cities, they experienced nature. And that's really ironic in a way, because it's clear that the lockdown itself happened because of our own destruction of environment, because coronavirus is a disease which has been given to us humans through wildlife and through our exploitation of wildlife. So honking that horn is hurting your heart. That's what the doctors say. Festivals have the loudest noise, firecrackers. Study hearing of the Mumbai police, which we did, showed more than 70% of them have hearing loss. We did training sessions for the Mumbai police to explain to them why they should be at the forefront of controlling noise. Children suffer hearing loss. It is said that teenagers today have as much hearing loss as 60-year-olds had in previous generations. India faces an epidemic. We did various drives with various partners, including the news houses. This is one we did for 3 months with the Times of India, with the traffic police, the first no honking day. People ask me, aren't you afraid to go on the street with a decibel meter? But people are always interested when it comes to their own health and to their own children. And children are at the forefront of educating their parents, because sometimes the elder generation, my generation, doesn't want to learn. So educating children means that they go out and tell their parents, we don't like this noise, we can't study. It's been found in a study that children who went to a school next to a railway track, on the one side of the school next to a railway track, were 1 year behind in their reading ability from children who studied on the other side where there was no railway track. So we did all kinds of partnerships with various partners. As I said, this is against honking, with the government of Maharashtra, with the police. Honking is injurious to health. It's been listed as the new smoking because it's something you can't avoid. But it's people who can do this. It's many women who are in the lead of these kind of campaigns to take noise readings, to complain, and to make sure we have change. The other effect, very quickly, Roto, is sand mining, which I worked on, because I found that the beach outside my house was being ruined by sand mining. 20 years later, this is the state of Kihim Beach. And to me, it felt very personal because I grew up near this beach. And I stopped a truck, again, 20 years ago. I would not advocate that others do this because I was beaten up and hospitalized. And but when you face adversity, you have a choice to make. Either you give up or you keep going, because if you give up, then you know that that's the end of it. And if you keep going, you know that you're going to be threatened and attacked and possibly again. But it's something worth doing because it's been proven to be worth it. So I filed public interest litigation. I went out, these are some of the very first pictures ever of mechanical sand dredging. And again, I was attacked because of it. This time there was an attempt to kill me, and this is my car at the police station. I was fortunate not to be killed. But after that, it became clear that there was a mafia in operation, and they were attacking, interfering women like me, but also attacking government and police officers in a very concerted way. This is right here in Maharashtra. It's happening across the street. And of course, when you're attacked and you think your attackers are really bad people because they're a mafia and they're terrible and they tried to kill you. But when I went out and I started meeting these sand miners for the first time, this is a piece done by Reuters, where I found that these sand mafia were the poorest of the poor. And their children, I met one of these divers who dived down 50 feet without equipment to mine sand. And he said that I have a daughter, I want to educate my daughter. So I keep doing this because I don't want my children to ever have this situation again. So this is the other side of our poverty, of the things that women can do. We have more empathy, I think, when we see even people who attacked me, but I see the situation they are in, and we can do something which perhaps benefits everyone. You can see there are children at the site. This boy was 13 years old when I met him. He had been mining sand already for at least 5 years because he said he had fever and his parents couldn't afford to send him to school. So they sent him to work instead. And these stories are so heartrending that that there's much more to it than what you can see. And this is again something I wrote for Mumbai Mirror. We are not sand mafia, say children and men pushed into mining it. Sand mining happens everywhere. This is the main railway line out of Bombay. That's the bridge at Vaitarna. There's a train going over it. All our lives are at risk because it's the men who make these policies who really don't care. It's sand mining which has led to the disasters and floods in Uttarakhand and in the Western Ghats, where millions of people have lost their lives. And again, women and children are most impacted. Sand mining led to the collapse, perhaps, of this bridge at Mahad, where hundreds of people died. And I again wrote this thing for Mumbai Mirror saying, act before the Vaitarna bridge goes that way. But the politicians, the people who make the policies, typically men, don't want to acknowledge it. We need an environmental police, perhaps. We need to show solidarity with the environment. We who think we are not affected directly, but are, because ultimately all of us are. I took this issue to the UN in 2012. The UN had no idea what is sand mining. I participated in these documentary films. The first one was made by Artes and released in Germany and Paris. This one was made by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, but the attacks continue. You can see that there are various types. We talked about the women who suffered when the men who took up against sand mining were attacked and killed in some of the villages. It's very fortunate that India also has the solutions, because the solutions come from garbage, which is another huge environmental issue. And I have worked with a professor of IIT Bombay and his PhD student, who's a woman, and they, for the very first time, gave me some kind of figures as to what the solutions could be, what is the raw material that could be used. I presented to the UN. I did the keynote address in the very first roundtable on sand in 2008. It was in Geneva, so I couldn't go. It was virtual before lockdown happened. They incorporated all the case studies from India and presented it in 2009 to the first mineral governance policy document of the UN, in which they included sand. Professor Asolekar of IIT Bombay has quantified the sand. I won't go into the details, but as I said, he has come to the conclusion that 100% of India's sand requirements can be met, not through natural sand, but through aggregates. And his PhD students, who are women, are working on mainstreaming these projects. This is the document, the first enforcement and monitoring guidelines for sand mining. But I'd also like to say that all this looks like, being attacked and this and that. But I was invited to walk the ramp at Lakme Fashion Week in 2020, just before lockdown in February. And so I took my decibel meter with me when I went, because I wanted to talk about how women have many sides to them. We are the ones who love fashion and sustainable fashion. And we've also heard about, buying and supporting sustainable fashion and handicrafts and all those other things. But we can also be at the point of policy decision making and implementation, which is where we should be, not in the interest of women alone, but in the interest of all of us. And I think we need to lead the policies which will give us a better and more inclusive world, not just by empowering women at the grassroots, but by making sure the policies are such that our children will grow up in a better world. So I'm very honored, Elsa Marie, to be part of your book, She Is, which is such a wonderful example of talking about women who worked in so many different sectors, and to be one of them, hopefully working in policy, in the policies, as I said. And is this kind of a journey easy? Well, no, it isn't easy. But I was, featured, honored to be featured in Dainik Bhaskar across all their newsprints. Our most difficult challenges are the most worthwhile. And I truly believe that. And that's a message I would like to pass on to our young people, the young women, Disha Ravi, who's out there petitioning the UN, making them listen to our voices, making the UN Secretary General tell us that it's we who lead. It's not them who lead. It's we who lead, the people. We can do it. And this is a banner which a hoarding which the Mumbai police released with us. Thank you, Mumbaikars, for choosing diyas, not firecrackers. This is the kind of change we can make on the ground when children and women are involved. This sand is our sand. Please protect it. And Awaz Foundation, everyone is a member of Awaz Foundation for me, who chooses to take action on any of these issues. And women and young people are foremost in that. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Samaira. That was really a wonderful presentation, and those visuals were really heartbreaking as well as uplifting at the same time. So thank you for sharing that. And your point about we need more empathy in leadership is absolutely, absolutely on point. We have, with the current events in the world today, if more leaders had, an inclusive and an empathetic mindset, maybe they would ask the questions to solve the problems rather than show aggression. So thank you, Samaira.
Thank you.
So now our last speaker is Roona Ray, and she is absolutely fascinating in the work that she does. It's also very, very hopeful and optimistic. Unfortunately, we don't have Afreen with us, so Roona is our last speaker. So then please put your questions in the chat for all our speakers. Over to you, Roona.
Thank you so much, Elsa. Lovely seeing you once again, and thank you for having me and in the book. And those were very, very inspirational talks before me. And thank you, Samaira. That was something which I'll not forget in a long time to come. And I'm honored to be here amongst other panelists and the other attendees. So to give you a gist about myself, I'm a fashion designer by profession who turned environmentalist. The fashion industry is a huge industry, so to wrap it up in a few minutes would be very difficult, but it's basically a $3 trillion industry, and which has a lot of aspects which it contributes towards when it comes to climate change. So as a fashion environmentalist, I have started looking at these processes and trying to delve into it and find solutions as to how we could abate it. To make it really simple, the clothes that all of you are wearing weren't just made just like that. Now, we have cotton that is grown. There's a lot of water that goes into it. We know cotton is an extremely water-intensive crop. We also have a lot of child labor when it comes to pollinating of the cotton crops. You've got the spinning mills, then you have the fabric that is made, and then it is sewn. And you have different tiers of the industry basically that support the entire core. So when I was in the fashion industry and when we were making prototypes, which means that before making the actual sweater that I'm making or the basic shirt that you're wearing, it would go through these processes where we would have like a muslin fabric that was cut up and then made into the right fit. To get the right fit, the muslin piece or the prototype that was made would go through different tiers in the organization for approval. So you would have, for example, the product manager who would take a look at the piece and say, no, I don't like this pocket. Maybe we need to change it. So what happens to that prototype? That prototype is thrown away. So that gets to be a piece of waste. Another piece is made where the pocket is adjusted, and then there's somebody else who says, you know what, I think we should probably change the collar and give it a mandarin collar. So again, that gets to be another piece of that goes to waste. So on and so forth. There would be, to get this one perfect shirt, which is seemingly perfect within the organization, but probably we have no market research to know whether it really would do well, that would have generated at least 10 pieces of prototyping waste. Now, if you calculate that into, say, probably 200 pieces that were prototyped or made, you would know the amount of waste that was generated, and this is called the hidden waste. Apart from that, apart from prototyping, you also have the prints and the dyes. Now, all of us are wearing colored clothes. Now, to get this perfect color, that also went through a certain, a certain process. So when we would get like swatches back and there would be a certain dye change, we would send it back and say, no, we need to get the exact color which was made. People don't realize to get even a 5-inch by 5-inch swatch dyed, it takes the same amount of time, process, water, money, energy to do, an entire ream. So we would have that process, which would go back and forth. The similar thing with printing. So in the back end, there would be so much of waste that was generated, but then most of it would end up in the landfill. So this is something that I saw and it stuck with me. And I was like, we need to do something with, the waste that is actually generated from the industry. We're not even talking about the waste that happens on floor when garments are being cut with the extra fabric that is actually left behind, because even that ends up in the landfill. The other aspect, the other most common aspect that I like to speak about is because all of us wear denim. And the denim industry is again rampant when it comes to child labor. The reason I can say this is because I have worked in denim industries, and most of the international denim firms, they outsource a lot of production from the global south. And when you go into these factories, you have children who are boys, most of them, who are like, probably 15 years and above. And the way denim is actually made, or the scraping is done, is where they put the denims through these inflated balloons, and they have sandpaper and they kind of sand it. So when you sand it, you get the faded effect. But what happens when you're sanding it is that you have a lot of fiber that is also released into the rooms. So you have these enclosed rooms where you have like, probably 25 to 30 boys working, and you just have these makeshift masks that you're wearing, but you're working in this day in and day out. Now, when you're working this day in and day out, you're not going to wear the mask all the time. And when I walked in there, I was affected by the fibers. And this causes a lot of occupational lung disease. And there are a lot of people who have actually died because of this. Apart from the child labor, you also have the occupational lung disease that happens. So you have the denim industry, which is again water intensive, which contributes to occupational lung disease, and at the same time has child labor. The third aspect, which I did see, which again is very common, was the dyeing industry. Now, when I got to travel to Tirupur, for example, where we do a lot of these cotton knits, there were factories which were a lot of unorganized sections. Like even I'm from Bangalore. Now, if you go to Bangalore, there's a place called Commercial Street. And on Commercial Street, there's this dyeing unit, which is, probably on the second floor. And all of the effluents go into this one main drain that connects probably connects the entire city all the way down to the other sections. So the same thing, and all the effluents go out at night. There is no water recycling that has been put into place. If you look at the people who are also living there, they're prone to environmental racism, as we call it, because there is no way that they can probably, raise their voices against these unorganized factories, because you also have the governments who turn a blind eye to it. So when you had a lot of multinationals who were investing in organizations of this sort, and it doesn't get to be that they would invest in, like, say, factory A, because factory A takes a lot of orders from many other corporates, and then they outsource it to the smaller factories. And these factories are the ones who get affected and who are also responsible for a lot of damage that actually happens to the environment. So as a designer, I said it was time to kind of create awareness not just within the industry, but also within the design process, and also with consumers, when consumers can make better choices. So what I did was that this was for the United Nations Ocean Decade. I started delving into indigenous techniques, like processes that were practiced by the royal high courts in, in Japan and in China, where they would have like these drops of water which would have inks floating on it. We call it, in a modern day term, we call it as marbling, where a lot of paper is also done that way. But then the beauty of this is that you have the inks that float on the surface, and then you take the fabric, and when you transfer it on the surface, you have the inks that get transferred onto the fabric. So in this way, we managed to print 250 meters of fabric using only 50 liters of water. And since the inks were extracted from chlorophyll, there was no water pollution that happened. And the coagulant for the water was seaweed. So even the excess water that was drained in, which was sent back, was not polluting the environment, and at the same time we did not waste water. So these were the kind of techniques we started employing. The other thing is that, like I spoke about, the fabric waste that exists in the fashion industry because of the cutting table, all of this ends up in the landfill. So what we did was we started segregating the fabric waste, which we had the colored waste and you had the white waste, and taking those up, we got them to paper factories. So when you have cellulosic garments, which are like, for example, cotton, which is plant-based, that can be broken down because paper is cellulose. So rather than cutting, trees and creating new cellulose, we would recycle these garment scraps and make them back into paper and reintroduce them into the industry. The third thing is when we talk about recycling. Now, there's a lot of talk about plastic, because plastic, we know, is one of the largest polluters against when it comes to the environment. And we have fashion that also largely contributes towards it, because almost everything that we have right now is plastic. Even it could be your acrylic sweater or your plastic buttons or the packaging, or even the mannequins that we use in fashion, and even the hangers. You find plastic. I mean, I look at my table, there's probably 80% of plastic like sitting right now. And what do you do with that? You have two things that happens with plastic. One is when you try to recycle plastic, it creates a lot of dangerous hydrocarbons, which could be, worse for the environment. But then what do we do with the existing plastic that we have? We need to find solutions. So one aspect is that, yes, we need to probably recycle them back into making fiber. But once it's recycled, plastic cannot be recycled again because it gets to be too brittle. So if you're talking about single-use plastic, like the PET bottles that are made into yarn and then spun into a t-shirt, don't expect that t-shirt to be made back into a t-shirt once it comes to its end of life, because that's going to end up in the landfill. Right now, we're just prolonging its time. So there are companies who take a lot of ghost fishing nets and can make them into yarn. But what we did was we started working with certain nonprofits where we helped beach cleanups, where you could get the ghost fishing nets, but instead of actually recycling it or making them back into yarn or making them back into plastic, we worked around it as designers and started creating fruit bags out of it, which were again reintroduced into the fashion industry and also gave the women of the coastal communities an additional income because they started making fruit bags. So these are a few ways that one can probably help in abating climate change. The other one that I keep speaking about is also consumer-driven behavior, because according to reports by the McKinsey report, 60% of climate abatement when it comes to fashion lies with the consumer. Because when it comes to us, there is not much that can happen. Either we're working on recycling right now, we're working on having units that are that can probably take back garments and get them, made into other different yarn, or like I said, the paper, but those are still very, very nascent and it's not very widespread. So I started this project called the Peace Flight Project, which is again in association with the United Nations Ocean Decade. where you have old t-shirts that probably would have existed in your cupboard. And I have been taking this to schools and now even to prisons, where we just recently got the San Quentin prison that signed up for it. And there is Sister Teresa who's there in the group. Thank you, sister, because you gave me this idea. But they just signed up for this. And we have been converting old t-shirts and bed sheets into canvases, where we've had inmates and students draw upon them what it means to be a better world, their commitments for climate action. And then we take these canvases and then they're sewn to be a large flag. This flag has been displayed in city councils across the US. We also have, because of COVID, we couldn't extend it, but then we plan to have it as a global movement. It was also associated with the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, the International Peace Bureau. And this project gets people to realize their actions, their commitments. And we've also heard news that inmates, after listening to us and being a part of the program and the Peace Flag Project, have actually moved out and decided to be a part of the beach cleanups and volunteer activities. So yeah, so I think these are a few ways that we could do it. It's a lot. I mean, I could keep talking about this, because the subject is so vast. But yeah,
would you like to show us something from your work?
Yes, let me try and see if I can share my screen, and I'll show you the art of water painting that I did, which I just spoke to you about, where we dyed 250 meters of fabric using only 50 liters of water. The whole screen can be seen.
Do you also want to show us a little bit about your seaweed designs, your latest ones?
Yes, I'll have to probably look at it. Do we have the time?
Yeah, very quickly, if you can show that. So, I mean, it's possible. Like right now, we are even talking about seaweed becoming a primary food item in the future. Why not think about alternate ways of clothing, creating clothing? So, and it doesn't have to be ugly. It can be very beautiful, like you've just shown us.
I have this one activism video that I did using cyanobacteria.
Okay.
I can show you that. Why is that playing? One second. I have no idea where that's playing.
Okay, maybe you can just put the link in the chat and we can have a look at it later, so that everybody also can have a look.
I have no idea why this music is going on.
You have to probably close that other.
I've closed it.
Okay, so Sumaira, if
okay.
you can switch on your video, we can then add you to the group. Are there any questions? Roona Ray, please put your contact details. There are people who want to get in touch with you regarding your work. Sumaira, can you please switch on your video so I can add you to the panel? But last thoughts, if no one has any questions for our panelists, you know, how are you paying it forward? Because I do feel that, you know, that is a critical aspect of even women's leadership. So Smita, maybe you can go first.
Thanks, Elsa. So paying it forward at many levels. I think the most active or the most continuous one really is mentoring young women through different colleges, universities, alumni associations. So I do it through LSR. I do it through the Vedika, you know, scholars program for women. I do it through Young India Fellowship at Ashoka University. So that continues. And that's kind of, I think, apart from, you know, people who have worked on my team, those relationships continue, you know, and those are kind of ongoing mentoring support networks. The other is really, I think, building community. So, I mean, one thing really is that we don't need to do anything alone, you know, and the minute you reach out and ask for help, which I know women find it hard to do, but more and more, I find that, you know, it's so quickly that a community comes together and is there for you to support you and hold you up. So as much as you're giving, you're receiving back as well, you know, in terms of the support. And so that's really the way I've been doing it. The other is my work on boards, I think, which is where, you know, strategy or policy can be influenced. And so I kind of, I like having that perspective of what can I do at a board level to make sure that there is not just a seat at a table, but, you know, the voice at the table and you're heard and you're respected for what you're saying. But also then being able to influence, say, CSR spend, which at the other end, at the grassroots level, is so critical to the survival of a small organization, you know. So balancing that kind of board perspective with the very grassroots perspective, I feel is another way that I'm able to build a bridge and pay it forward.
Thanks, Smita, for that. Rema, how are you paying it forward?
It was really amazing to hear all of them speak, inspiring work by each one of you. While they were speaking, I was already making plans how to reach out to them so that I can somehow bring them to my district to work in, you know, in the various areas that we are working on right now. It's really amazing. There's only one thing that I'd like to say. You see, I work in a sector where if you look at the number of female participation, it is, you know, less than 10%. The number of female police officers in the entire country is somewhere around 7%, even today. And at leadership position, it's hardly around 1%. So for us, you know, it becomes a bigger challenge because the fact that we got an opportunity to be here, it's really big. So we have to prove ourselves on a daily basis, and we have to make the space more inclusive, make it more sensitive so that, you know, it will become more attractive for, you know, women to join. That is a bigger challenge. So every day when we work, you know, we have this additional responsibility on our shoulders, which keeps telling us that, you know, you have to make it more attractive for these women. Even today, if you look at the career preferences among the rural women, the girls who pass out of colleges, policing is not, I don't think it figures anywhere in the top 10, you know, career options for women because of the way they are socially conditioned, because of the stereotypical projection these, you know, job profiles face. So that is one challenge, and I've been using whatever opportunities that come my way to make it more attractive, just to make, you know, tell them that, you know, no, it's not that hard. I mean, you have to go through that that hard phase. I was listening to Madam Sumaira while she was explaining the journey through pictures and, you know, news reports. It doesn't happen that easily. I mean, you have to go through a lot of struggle. But when you look at it, you don't feel that it's hard. You feel that, somebody's out there doing it. So it is very much possible. I was looking at, Roona's presentation. It is so beautiful. I mean, imagine, I would have never thought about such designs. We would have never, I mean, I'm wearing a Fab India now. You don't think about what goes in the background. You don't think about the woman who is actually, sitting somewhere in a remote village making this happen. We don't think about it. And in the kind of work Smita is doing, bringing these things to the world, mainstreaming these activities, that's a challenge. And I have always felt that when women come together, there is this amazing energy, there's this positive vibe. They always they're there for each other, the sisterhood. I don't see this among the men. Men are pretty competitive. At least that's what I've seen in my department, But women, they band together, they stick together. And I think, from different sectors, all of us have to come together and just, make it more attractive what we do, so that, more women join. I mean, we just have to increase the numbers. I think all of us have that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Rema. It's our responsibility to increase the numbers, but each one of you is paving the way to make it easier for the next generation to follow in the footsteps. So thank you for your work. So Myra, how are you paying it forward?
Well, for me, lockdown, like for many of us, lockdown was a very difficult time. And all the work that I had been doing on the ground came to a dead halt. So I had to reinvent myself, and I realized after some time of moping at home that one thing I can do wherever I may be, and now that I'm getting older, maybe it's more relevant even, that I can perhaps no longer go and stop a truck somewhere, and get attacked, but I can write and I can speak. So I think for me, the way forward will be to help anyone who's interested in this space, especially young people, to believe they can do it and that they can lead these subjects. Young people are in a very despairing state of mind because they feel that nothing can happen. Things are so difficult. We have climate change, we have COVID, we have all these issues that we've talked about. And I know many young women who have decided not to have children because they're so afraid of what's going to happen. So I feel that, if I can help younger people feel that they are going to be the leaders of the future and they are going to take charge of these policies and maybe learn a little bit from my experiences, I think that's what I would like to do.
Thanks, Sumaira. And writing can be extremely powerful. I myself, in the last, 8 years, have written and written and written and spoken and spoken and spoken. And I think every time somebody writes back and says it resonated, even if one person says that, I feel it's worth my time. So thank you for that. And it's kind of documenting, in a way, what is happening, right? Roona, what about you?
Yeah, thank you, Elsa. So paving the way forward, for me, I believe creativity is the way. And I love to use fashion as activism. And if we have time, I would like to share a video, which I think is very relevant to what is happening right now. It was my collaboration with the International Peace Bureau. I think the video should be 2-3 minutes. So is that okay? Should I do that?
Yeah, so as we end, I just want to say thank you to a few people who joined us, and Annette Ludwig from the German Federal Foreign Office, Anne-Marie Quinn, Teresa Kotterin, Lillian Kunzimana. Thank you for joining, and everybody else. And I would like to thank all our panelists for sharing their insights. Their work is so valuable to us. Sumaira, Smita, Neelam had to leave because it's holy, Rema, and of course, Roona. And we'll end with Roona's video. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel,
Thank
founder
you.
of Pretty Litter.